Hi, my name is Nikki. I'm the Obsessive Bookseller, and welcome to my channel. Today I want to review The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. It's a standalone novel, which I'll get into in a bit. It's a Japanese-inspired war story. It holds the spot as the best book I've ever almost DNF'd. I used to be one of those people who made myself finish everything I started. I'm here to tell you that if a book isn't working for me, a miracle has to happen for my opinion to change when I keep reading past the point of wanting to put it down. But in this case, different story. It took about 30% into the novel before I finally started to get on board with things, and that was about the time when I started to form a connection with the characters. And beyond that, about the halfway point is when I really knew I was sold. This is a self-published novel. I have been known to be a little critical of the self-publishing market, very strong opinions about it. This book allowed me to appreciate the positive side of the self-publishing market. I mentioned in my last review that there tends to be a formulaic plot structure applied to most modern fantasy these days. Some authors are really good at disguising it and putting their own twist on it, but for the most part it's the same basic plot structure. Because Sword of Kaigen was self-published, the author had the freedom to be as creative as possible and break the rules, and that was easily my favorite part about the novel. It was so unconventional. The crux of the story happens in the middle of the book as opposed to the end of the book, and I think a lot of things surrounding it were really interesting. And it also enabled the author to make decisions that a big publishing house probably would not have allowed, because it's not as conducive to generating sequels. So yes, the unconventionality of the book was my favorite part. The other thing I loved about it was the deep connection I formed with the characters. Now, it did take a long time to get to that point. There are some incredibly gut-wrenching, profound things that happen in this book. And you don't necessarily have to be a mother to appreciate some of the things that the character Misaki went through. But as a mom, it hit me close, and I found myself crying alongside the character on a few occasions. And that is remarkable for me. I don't get emotionally invested in books a lot these days. Maybe one every 2 or 3 years, and this one got me. The author was so good at creating a sensory experience for me. There were several instances throughout the book where I felt the fear of the situation, where the hairs on the back of my neck rose. One scene got me so badly that when I put the book down, I couldn't go to bed. So the things I loved about this book, I loved fiercely. They were done brilliantly. And the thing I liked the most, which is the unconventionality, because it was self-published, is also the thing that generated the weaknesses of the story for me. And now we come back to the fact that I almost DNF'd the book. If it had not been a selection for a book club that I moderate, I might have put it down. If it had not been for the half a dozen people that jumped on the thread where we were buddy reading it on the Goodreads group that I manage, who said, "Oh my gosh, I freaking love this book," I might have DNF'd it. And the reason being is poor pacing and a slew of info dumps. The entire first quarter of the book was one explanation after the other on how things worked in this world. The characters would get 2 sentences out, and then we'd launch into a couple of pages of explanation unpacking what they just said over and over again. And it got to the point where it was just so tiresome. We were moving at such a sluggish pace, and I felt like I was being told about the novel instead of experiencing it for myself. And there was a little glimmer in there of beauty in between all of the explanations. Like I said, the sensory thing was really active and the characters were interesting. But yeah, it felt like a slog. I asked the Goodreads group, does it get better? What happens that makes it so that everybody loves this book? Because I'm just not seeing it right now. Rest assured, the magic does happen. You just have to commit. Another thing that I thought was a weakness started out as a strength. The world building. It had a cool concept right out the gate of this kind of isolated village that practiced the old ways of fighting and ways of living life. surrounded by a world filled with all of these modern technologies. It was a cool juxtaposition, and it kind of was giving me Hogwarts for Ninja vibes early on. But as interesting as the framework was, it did not go anywhere. In fact, it just got a little more convoluted and confusing as the story went along. And several things about the society and the experiences the characters had just did not make sense. I feel like it just wasn't richly imagined enough. And I think a few of the ideas were really good, but they needed to be fleshed out more. And what's more, one of my book club members pointed out that there were a couple of characters whose only function was to explain things to the main character. They didn't have any bearing on the story as a whole other than to be a facilitator for info dumps. That's a problem. Objectively, taking all of the strengths and weaknesses into account, the book merits about a 4 out of 5 stars for me. However, what it did well, it did brilliantly, and it had me so emotionally invested that I had some emotion. And for that alone, I'm bumping it up to a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Now for my standalone rant. The book is being pushed as a standalone novel. That's what I keep hearing from everybody I've heard mention it. Oh, it's a standalone. You don't have to commit to a series. Just because a sequel hasn't been written yet does not make it a standalone. Just because the author's not planning to write it anytime soon does not make it a standalone. The last 25% of the book was essentially set up for a sequel. It was not a self-contained story where everything was resolved, and it wasn't one of those books where everything's not resolved with purpose. The author very clearly had plans to continue this story. And I'll believe it truly is one and change my tune if 10 years go by and nothing else has been published on it. But I think we'll see something happen here soon. I think either a publishing house will pick it up, or I think the author will get excited at all the success and revisit it. Because let's face it, that's just how the publishing market goes. If you can make more money, you do it. If you can be more creative, you do it. So rant over. Now we get into the other books you might like. If you liked The Sword of Kaigen, you might also like The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is a no-brainer. These two books are incredibly similar, so if you liked one, chances are you will definitely like the other one. An Alchemy of Masks and Mirrors by Curtis Craddock. This may seem like a weird suggestion, but I'm recommending it for its unconventionality, and something about the overall feel of both novels rang similar to me. But absolutely nothing about the storylines are the same, so keep that in mind. The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This one might also seem like a weird suggestion, but it's that unconventionality factor, and if you enjoyed the world building in Sword of Kaigen, this one is an example of what a fully developed framework looks like. Sword of Kaigen was kind of a visceral reading experience for me, and this is one of the few books that also evoked that same sense of gut wrench in me. And for similar reasons, I'm suggesting The Mirror Empire by Cameron Hurley. Definitely an unconventional plot structure, a lot of risk-taking, and kind of a similar tone of writing style. And then for the pure fun of it, Minimum Wage Magic by Rachel Aaron. If your favorite thing about The Sword of Kaigen was the characters and the sword fighting, this might be a fun little adventure. But keep in mind, you should probably read the Heartstriker series by the same author first, because this is a spin-off. But yeah, this one kind of celebrates the fun elements from Sword of Kaigen that I loved. Oh, and I haven't read this one yet, but it's on the lineups of books like this one that I think I might like, and that's The Jade Wars by Fonda Lee. I'm hoping to read that one soon. So, there's my review. Perhaps a little longer than usual, but I had a lot of thoughts on this one. I appreciate you joining me for my videos, and I look forward to catching you next time. Thanks.